wherever you get your podcasts on KSEV KGBC, the voice of Texas.
You're listening to the voice of Texas, AM 700 KSEV Tomball and AM 1540 KGBC Galveston.
News this hour from Town Hall. I'm Keith Peters in Washington. Wildfires are burning out of control in 2 areas of Southern California.
More than 17,000 people are under evacuation orders as wildfire continues to threaten suburban homes in Southern California. The Sandy Fire in hills above Simi Valley, northwest of Los Angeles, has already consumed more than 2 square miles of dry brush. There is zero containment. Evacuation orders and warnings are still in place for several neighborhoods in Simi Valley, a city of more than 125,000 people. Meanwhile, firefighters are battling a 23 square mile blaze on Santa Rosa Island off the Southern California coast. I'm Lisa Dwyer.
As he travels to China, Russia's president releases a video for the Chinese people.
Vladimir Putin's video address claimed that Russia and China were expanding ties economically, politically, and in defense. He'll be eager to discuss selling more oil and gas to what he calls his dear friend, Mr. Xi. And there will be talks about a new Siberian pipeline between their 2 nations. Since Mr. Putin's invasion of Ukraine, Russia has become far more reliant on China's economy. For Beijing, this is a balancing act, particularly after Mr. Trump's visit last week. China wants stable relations with the West, but strategically, Russia is a close neighbour. Mr. Xi wants to appear capable of talking to all sides.
The BBC's Laura Bicker reporting. President Trump has endorsed Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton over incumbent Senator John Cornyn in that tight Texas Senate race. On Wall Street, the Dow down by 322 points, the Nasdaq dropped 220. More on these stories at townhall.com.
From the people who brought you It's the Dog Park comes.
Your dog is limping, but she seems fine. Plus, you've heard they can fake it just to get what they want. So what's the deal now? You're being gaslit.
Protect your dog from injury and illness with Progressive Pet Insurance.
Oh, now she switched legs. What a diva.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Coverage subject to policy terms.
In the military, the mission was clear. You knew what to do. Now, the mission has changed. Stepping into civilian life isn't about finding a job. It's finding your purpose.
I wanted a career that would leverage the skills and discipline I gained in the military. IT just felt right.
My Computer Career offers class schedules that fit into your life and skills in high demand. Put your VA benefits to work. Visit mycomputercareer.edu/CWP to jumpstart your IT career today. An elite CompTIA certification partner. Financial aid is available to those who qualify, including VA benefits.
What time is it? It's time to calm down.
Swatch's new Royal Pop Pocket Watch has sparked chaos worldwide. The watchmaker says there is no shortage despite weekend crowds and fights at stores. Police in Paris used tear gas and a fistfight broke out in Milan. Long lines formed in London, Singapore, and New York. The watch retails for around $400, but is resold for thousands more. By the time the week began, it was all over eBay. Swatch says the chaos was due in part to some retailers not prepared for the demand. Rich Thomason reporting.
Starbucks is laying off 300 corporate employees and closing some U.S. offices. No coffee house employees are affected. The cuts will impact employees in support functions like marketing, human resources, and supply chain management. News and analysis at townhall.com. From Washington, I'm Keith Peters.
This program is brought to you in part by Ability Tree Experts. Ability Tree Experts, Houston's leading tree care professionals.
Call 281-441-4179.
From the KSEV Weather Center, tonight expect cloudy skies with high humidity levels along with a few showers and the possibility of a severe thunderstorm. These thunderstorms may lead to heavy rainfall, hail, and strong wind gusts. The temperature will drop to 72 degrees. Tomorrow will bring mostly cloudy conditions with continued humidity along with scattered showers and the potential for another heavy thunderstorm. Flash flooding is a concern as well. The high temperature will reach 81 degrees. Tomorrow night, anticipate mostly cloudy skies and continued humidity with isolated thunderstorms possible. The low temperature will be around 73 degrees with the KSEV Weather Center forecast. I'm AccuWeather meteorologist Jason Caterina.
Looking to save on energy cost? Then tune in Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. for the SolarWise Radio Show with your host, Sean Davis. That's the SolarWise Radio Show, 8 a.m. Saturday on AM 700 KSEV and AM 1540 KGBC, the voice of Texas.
Dan Patrick for my friend Louis Flory and Ability Tree Experts.
Spring is here and summer just around the corner, which means it's time to deep root fertilize your trees in addition to spraying for insects and disease. Let Ability Trees help maintain their value and repair all damage. Fed and pruned tree will be less susceptible to wind damage and uprooting. Caring for the beautiful and valuable trees on your property that you can replace should be done by experts. And the experts I use, it's very clear. It's Ability Tree Experts and Louis Flory, my friend for over 40 years. Gosh, this guy is the pro when it comes to taking care of trees. You know, pruning is important for the health of your trees, and pruning limits resistance to spring storms and allows the sun and fresh air into the canopy. Trees can be in distress several months without showing any signs, so don't wait to protect your investment at 281-441-4179, 281-441-4179, or visit their website at abilitytrees.com. Right now, Ability Trees is giving a deep root feeding with every tree prune. Ability Trees, Houston's leading tree care professional.
Launch control, this is Houston. We are go for launch.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It's ChrisX Radio. ChrisX Radio.
What we need right now is a clear message to the people of this country. This message must be read in every newspaper, heard on every radio, seen on every television. This message must resound throughout the entire intellect.
And now, your host.
I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
ChrisX.
ChrisX Radio. It is another Taco Tuesday edition of the program. Glad to have you here with us as we are rocking and rolling, bringing you that gift beyond price that is almost free, ladies and gentlemen. We bring you the spirit of talk radio, and boy, we got plenty to get into, as we always do. Man, there's so many stories I didn't have time to put them all in, but I'll sort of weave, and we'll do whatever we can to get everything in. Saw the one, I don't know if you saw what's happening in Maryland, but they sent out, 500,000 voter mail-in ballots, but there was an error, so they had to get rid of them, but they didn't get rid of them. They just sent out 500,000 more. So there's roughly 1 million potential voter fraud in Maryland. Shocker. Who would have possibly saw that coming? But anyway, we'll get time. We'll get into that. Once again, I'm glad to have you here on the program. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, we have Matt Locke, the voice of DFW. That's right. He's the host of the 9 to 11 a.m. show on WBAP, 820 a.m. out of Dallas-Fort Worth. So we'll talk with him. Some interesting news breaking right in the middle of early voting. John Cornyn and Fox News are not happy about it. I'll just say that. President Trump endorsed Ken Paxton today over incumbent John Cornyn. That is not awesome for John Cornyn. In fact, in many ways, I do believe this could be the death knell for John Cornyn's Senate career. He's been there for a gazillion years, so it's okay for him to go away. He probably should have thought about this. I guess the only thing I can think about guys like him and John Cornyn or Thomas Massey or Bill Cassidy, who just lost his primary, is these guys figured there was no way Donald Trump was going to get elected again. After making the mistake of feeling that there was no way he was ever going to get elected, and then with all the voter fraud stuff we saw in 20, looks like Donald Trump has won all three elections. Now, the 2020 election will never change. Understand they're just going through and finding massive amounts of voter fraud in these swing states. It all popped up in the middle of the night, and now they're finding hundreds of thousands of illegal ballots that all went to his opponent that popped up in the middle of the night after they ran off their poll workers. So they were supposed to have stopped counting, But they kept going. But anyway, you're not allowed to talk about that because we hate Trump. Because Orange Man bad. Actually, Orange Man is hysterical. If it weren't for Democrats right now, do you realize we would live in such fun times with Donald Trump and his crazy, hilarious stuff every day? The UFO files. By the way, got some Chris X files for you today. They're insane. It's actually simply, I'm just going to play a clip from Jesse Waters' program on Fox News yesterday. It's literally insane. But the problem is we live in insane times. Anyway, it would be so much fun to live in America today if it wasn't for Democrats, because Democrats ruin everything. And I do mean everything they touch, they ruin. Oh, man, anything in the world you got going on, whatever, if a Democrat is involved, they ruin it every time, guaranteed. That's just how it goes. So it's so funny because these late night talk shows have all just destroyed their own products. SNL has destroyed their own product. Does anybody still watch Saturday Night Live? If you do, why? Why would you watch it? It's garbage. Once again, I realize I'm a viewer of Saturday Night Live. I've been watching it since the early 70s, since it came out with the original cast. I'm Chevy Chase, and you're not. Gilda Radner. They were so good. Dan Aykroyd, the original cast was so good. And then they went through sometimes. Eddie Murphy was good. But then the 90s, which had Norm Macdonald and Dennis Miller and you name it. They just, Dana Carvey, Rob Schneider, Chris Farley, Adam Sandler, and Lorne Michaels, a radical Democrat, hated them. Couldn't get rid of them fast enough. They were hands down, in my opinion, the best, most talented version of Saturday Night Live. I think their box office receipts maybe show that. Adam Sandler alone, but you can throw in Chris Farley in there. But they were so good and so talented, but they were hated. Why? Because they tend to be a little bit more, at the time, libertarian. They're probably more conservative leaning, at least now. But that's... But once again, can you name 3 cast members from today? No, you can't. When's the last time you watched a late night talk show? I mean, any of the late night talk shows. When's the last time? Does anybody watch Stephen Colbert? No, nobody watched that garbage. That's why I was losing $40 million a year, and they canceled it. The other shows are soon to follow because they're doing the same thing. I used to watch late night talk. I used to watch SNL. I used to watch these things. I didn't stop watching them because I quit consuming entertainment. I quit watching them because they stopped being entertainment. They became nothing but a political wing of the Democrat cult, the propaganda machine. And I got tired of being propagated against. I used to watch David Letterman. I watched Jay Leno. Of course, I watched Johnny Carson was the best. So I watched all of those. And then all of a sudden, slowly but surely, and David Letterman is a hardcore leftist moron, but he hid that for the most part. He didn't sit there and try to force it down your throat every night when you're tired of politics and working all day and you want to be entertained. You enjoyed stupid pet tricks. You enjoyed the fun stuff that they would do. What was it? I can't remember his name. Melman? I'll remember it, or someone will remember it. Larry Bud Melman. You guys remember that? I used to watch all of those shows. All of them. And then Stephen Colbert. Jimmy Kimmel. What? Seriously? They're all trash. And they're all garbage. And they're all propaganda, basically. I remember they got all mad at Jimmy Kimmel for at Jimmy Fallon. Because Jimmy Fallon had Donald Trump on and actually grabbed his hair. And they're like, you're humanizing him. You can't do this. Who appointed you as the late night liberal goon? Because that's what they became. Anyway, so now our entertainment consists of watching Donald Trump roast reporters. And he does it well. And he's honest. And also forcing reporters to cover his ballroom being built. That was a brilliant move today. Donald Trump is really good at that. The other thing, too, is it's considered strokes of brilliance But the reality is they're just idiots. They're so hell-bent on doing everything they can, just like that moron last week. You know, the one that was Trump was talking about. Well, I'll play it for you. The one that was just so excited because, oh, my God, it doubled the ballroom. Are you kidding me? And here's what we call entertainment television now. It is this. It is not late night.
How's that different than your ballroom? So what happened is we have a ballroom that's under budget. It's going up right here. I've doubled the size of it because we obviously need that. And we're right now on budget, under budget, and ahead of schedule. You doubled. I doubled the size of it, you dumb person. Double the size. You are not a smart person.
But her response, you doubled. They're just so hell-bent on trying to destroy him that they can't even see their fingers in front of their own faces. They're stupid. Once again, for lack of a better term, and I don't use this because I got in trouble years ago because someone had a disability, child, and because I used the term retarded. I used to quote the movie. It was, Tropic Thunder? You never go full retard. It was a hilarious movie, and I would say that on the air. I said, you never do, and that I got in trouble for it. So I tend not to use that term lightly, but for lack of a better term, it is slowed. They are retarded. That is not a slight towards retarded people or people who are mental deficient. This is reporters who are set to cover the President of the United States, and they're so hell-bent on trying to destroy him, they make themselves look like total lunatics. Anyway, sorry, I should probably get back to what we're going to actually talk about today. So President Trump has finally endorsed Ken Paxton right in the middle of this primary early voting. Early voting is underway. I have early voted yesterday. It's running through Friday, this coming Friday, May 22nd. And then, of course, Election Day will be, obviously not today, next Tuesday, the 26th. So you can get out and vote. I'm thinking this endorsement of over John Cornyn with Ken Paxton, the president endorsing him, pretty much this could be the death knell, if you will, for John Cornyn's political career. We shall see. But then all of a sudden they say, what was it, roughly 90% of John Cornyn supporters said they will move over and support Ken Paxton in the general if in fact he wins. So that makes things probably not as close as they're showing in the polls right now with James Talafrico, to quote MAGA Craig's cousin, James Talafrico. Yes, he got that. War Secretary Pete Hegseth took a break from his official duties to appear alongside Kentucky congressional candidate Ed Galbraith during a Monday campaign event yesterday, because tonight's the primary challenge against Thomas Massie. Trump has once again supported Ed Galbraith. We'll see if Thomas Massie can survive his own primary. Whether he survives or not, these are way too close for sitting, Congress and senators. They're getting smoked like Bill Cassidy. Because we've learned that they're not about progress. They're not about working on behalf of the American people. They're working on trying to stop Donald Trump. They hate him. Iran has sent an updated peace proposal to America via Pakistan mediators. The foreign ministry has confirmed yesterday, which reportedly includes demands for reparations and no meaningful concessions of the country's illicit nuclear activity, which seems to have staved off another, bombing from Operation Epic Fury. So Trump has backed off of that. President Trump, once again, I mentioned earlier, the White House construction goes beyond a ballroom. Apparently, Trump told reporters today as he stood outside, he detailed the complexities of this massive addition. There's actually a lot more than just a ballroom going on. There's going to be things underneath it, and there's going to be a whole lot going on. So it's not just a ballroom. It is actually a whole big thing. And then, as I said, I got some Chris X-Files. Jesse Waters last night on his show covered the researchers saying that dozens of crashed UFOs have been recovered with 4 different alien species on board. Wait till you hear this. And sources saying that they're too scared to talk because they could forfeit their life. And with what's happened with multiple scientists and things working on this, and with access to highly classified material, there's a legit chance something weird is going on. By the way, we also, once again, as I mentioned, we're streaming the program, the video portion of the program now on Facebook and then YouTube and then Twitter, X, and Rumble. So if you want to watch the video, you can if you're near a computer. If you want to check that out. By the way, you can always still continue to listen on 700 AM or 1540 AM here in Houston. You can download the KSEV Radio app, so you can listen anywhere you go, and then, of course, listen online at ksevradio.com. So, all right, let's go ahead and take a break, and then we'll come back. We'll have a quick segment, maybe take one call, and then we'll catch up with our good friend Matt Locke, the voice of DFW, from 820 AM WBAP up there in Big D. We'll say the cosmopolitan area. It is what it is. Us down here in Houston, well, we have our thoughts about the Dallas Cowboys and things up there. They're a little different. I would just say they're different. They're not like we are down here. We're different. All right, you're listening to ChrisXradio. Don't go don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to ChrisXradio here on your Taco Tuesday edition of the program. It is also early voting. We're underway. We're rolling through, Friday? 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. You have till this Friday to go vote. Today, it doesn't seem to be quite as wet as they were forecasting, which is good. And then, like I said, the runoff election date is actually next Tuesday, May 26th. If you're in Harris County, I've had some people reaching out to me from some of the other counties. They have their own websites if you want to download your sample ballot. But harrisvotes.com in Harris County. If you're in Harris County, you can go download your sample ballot and then go look and see who's on so you can be prepared and get in and out in a minute like I did yesterday. Talked to some other people last night. They were saying, yeah, they were in and out in a minute. It didn't take them long at all. You got Trump endorsing Ken Paxton over incumbent John Cornyn today, which could be the death knell for John Cornyn's political career. I think when it comes to this Senate race, endorsing him in the middle of the primary is just, oh, man. Well, I say the middle. It's only the second day, and he did it early. So that means with a few more days of early voting, Trump didn't let that get too far. So you got that. And then you got Pete Hegseth out there campaigning for Ed Gallren, who is running against Representative Thomas Massey out of Kentucky, whom we'll see if he goes the route of Bill Cassidy in Louisiana, who just got beat in his primary. These Trump-endorsed candidates tend to do pretty well. Not all of them win, but, man, some of them do really well. So they're showing clips right now in the news of Trump talking with all the construction going on behind him. It's so funny. Listen, we're out here doing this. We're building the ballroom. It's fantastic. It's huge. What? I can't hear you. There's too much construction going on. And it's one of the greatest constructions of all time. So Iran apparently has now updated their peace proposal. So we'll see about that. And then once again, the construction goes on. And we'll, at some point today, I'll play the audio from Jesse Waters' show last night, talking about dozens of these crash UFOs with various types of aliens on board, various species. And the different species are pretty interesting. Anyway, let's go and try to get one call in here before we catch up with our guest. Matt Locke will join us there at the bottom of the hour. He's the voice of DFW, the host of 9 to 11 a.m. weekday show on 820 a.m. WBAP. Let's go out to Sugar Land and pick up with Joe. Joe, thanks for hanging on. Welcome to ChrisX Radio.
Oh, Chris, what's up?
Hey, Joe, what's going on, Joe?
There better be a cheerleader under that bed.
I think that's an actual line from one of the episodes. That's pretty good.
Yeah, he walks into a cheerleading uniform on the bed, and he's like, "Oh, there better be a cheerleader under that bed."
Boy, that shows the difference on how times have changed.
Chris, I just wanted to ask you, I don't know if you mentioned Eddie Murphy also, but who is Dan Aykroyd? Is he the founder of Acura or something?
You don't know who Dan Aykroyd is?
You said Aykroyd. I wasn't sure it was the same one. But also you said the news was propagating against you. Do you mean propagandize? That's two different words. Are they trying to propagandize you or propagate you?
Well, we'll say propagandizing. I don't know if I said against me, but yeah,
I don't think they're propagating you. I'm a hall monitor today. Sorry. Speaking of that, what you should have noticed on Jesse Waters recently was the information on January 6th. I think it's funny how every time something comes out, like Hunter Biden's laptop, 51 officials signed a document saying it was Russian disinformation, even though the FBI had it for 2 years and they knew darn well it was Hunter Biden's laptop. As soon as that came out on, if you remember a couple of years ago, as soon as that came out on like mainstream news that they admitted it, there's aliens. I got bodies. I got different kinds of bodies. We got places. We got vehicles with bodies. Like, remember that creep in the hearing? That guy that was like on meth or whatever in the hearing? He was almost like Peter Strozek, but without the being so demonic. He wasn't licking his lips and hopping around on the chair, but he was quite anxious.
I don't
quite
remember
eager to tell us there was aliens. It was like the day after the Hunter Biden laptop became mainstream years later, when they're like, oh, yeah, that was real. 51 officials lied to us. But so recently, Jesse Waters talked about all the Americans that were protesting being poisoned by COVID and protesting corrupt elections. The 26 FBI agents were there. And they are agents, by the way. I'm an attorney. I can tell you, if you look up agent theory, it's pretty simple. You have a principal and an agent that's directed by them to take action. He said there were no FBI undercover agents. Well, they certainly were undercover. They were dressed as MAGA fans, as Trump fans, and they're under the direction of the FBI. So that is, by definition, an agent of the undercover agent. But also they admitted they call them something else, kind of like with the gain of function. Like, that's not gain of function, like making a virus infect humans. That is not even what it means. We just changed it on the website this week, so.
Yeah, well,
anyway.
now it's my turn to play hall monitor. It was over 250 plainclothes FBI agents that were quote-unquote doing crowd control, which FBI agents don't do in the January 6th case. So it was that's their case, and that's what they stated.
They also admitted there was 26 undercover, like dressed as MAGA fans, like trying to rile them up.
There was 250 of them. They had to admit it. And now what they said was, once again, they didn't say they were undercover. They were, quote, unquote, doing crowd control, which the FBI does not do. So there's, like I said, thanks for the call, Joe. They're absolute trash. They're lies. What they did with COVID, the way they weaponized this virus, for one, which gain of function, this isn't even referring to that. You've got the gain of function aspect of it, but you've got that possible, which absolutely is the weaponizing of a virus to harm people. And then we've learned that Dr. Fauci and his little assistant were lying to the American people and working to cover it up. Thanks for the call, John. I'm getting a lot of noise, so I appreciate it, and we need to go and take a break. But there's that. As far as yes, I did mention Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy was good on SNL, and Dan Aykroyd. I'm sorry if I pronounced it Aykroyd. I may have been just speaking too fast. But Dan Aykroyd was a good one. He's interesting. But I believe the best SNL was the 90s SNL with, once again, Dennis Miller, Norm Macdonald, Adam Sandler. They're all so talented, or some were. They're just so. But the original group was talented. I mean, you had, like I said, Gilda Radner and Jane Curtin, and they were all really talented as well. So you go look at that. But we've learned, once again, things have been weaponized against the American people. We've learned the agencies were weaponized against the American people. And watching the swamp rats now go crazy at Trump for working on, it was $1.7 billion to go give some compensation to those who've had the federal government weaponized against them. There's not enough money in the federal government to go against all who have been weaponized. The government was weaponized against. We have learned the Biden administration weaponized all of the agencies, and the Obama administration weaponized the agencies against Donald Trump. They're still doing it. Well, they're not done. They're still doing it while denying they're doing it. And a perfect example is, once again, the Fauci. They all work under this great operation of, hey, listen, just feign ignorance. If you feign ignorance, well, then you can get away with whatever you want because you didn't intend to do it. 8647, ring a bell? That guy, Barack Obama, setting up shop in D.C. He's the only former president that has ever done that. And then, of course, once again, the fairest election in world history of all the elections that have ever happened and ever in the world history was 2020. There was absolutely zero fraud, except for all of the massive amounts of voter fraud that we have discovered that judges wouldn't take up under the mere fact that just on standing. We don't care if you've got facts and evidence and things to support it. We're not going to look at it. So, congratulations, you got Trump 4 years later. And you want to know why Trump won not only the popular vote and the Electoral College, which whatever the hell Kamala Harris is drinking these days, they need to go ahead and insert that breathalyzer in her microphone. But her talking about getting rid of the Electoral College, you want to get rid of that now? Why, you lost that too. And the popular vote. No matter what you did, Kamala, you lost. You were not even close. You were a terrible candidate inserted at the last moment for an even worse candidate that they were able to cheat across party lines to get in at the last minute. I mean, I wouldn't say they cheated other than the fact that they ran off the poll watchers, lied about a freaking pipe bursting, and then continued to count all night, and all the votes they counted after the poll watchers were gone all went to Joe Biden. Huh. How does that happen in 5 swing states? Yeah. Anyway, someone who can probably say a lot about that, but even more, once again, I'm not even looking backwards. I'm looking into what's going on right now. And President Trump endorsed Ken Paxton over incumbent John Cornyn today in the Texas U.S. Senate race. We'll talk about that with our guest here. We're going to take a break. We'll come back, pick up with our guest, Matt Locke. He is the voice of DFW. That's right. He's the host of the 9 to 11 a.m. program on 820 AM WBAP up in Dallas. He joins us here next on ChrisXradio. Don't you go anywhere. Oh, yeah. Can't stand it. Welcome back to ChrisXradio. Glad to have you here with us as we are rocking our way through a Taco Tuesday. Hey, tacos sound good. It's just about dinner time for most normal people that don't do radio shows from 4 to 6 p.m. Anyway, it is time to catch up with our guest, Matt Locke. He is the host of the 9 to 11 a.m. show weekdays on 820 a.m. WBAP, the voice of Dallas-Fort Worth. Matt Locke joins us. Matt, thanks for being here. Always good to catch up with you.
Always, my friend, and actually, the show actually has now an official name. It's the Matt Locke Show.
Oh, wow. That's very creative. I wonder how they came up with that.
You know.
You know how it is. I still like the voice of DFW myself, but then again, that's coming from the voice of Texas. But I think it just does it because I like to put myself in that hierarchy. So, but always good to catch up with you, especially on a day like today. All right, so I've been hearing from you along with other people, this endorsement, now that Trump has endorsed Ken Paxton, has sent a few shockwaves through the swampy portions of D.C. and the country. What are you hearing? First of all, do you think, which I believe, this is sort of the death knell for John Cornyn in this primary election? Do you think he's done at this point?
I honestly think that if Trump would have endorsed Cornyn, he still would have lost. Just my personal opinion. But what happened today, Chris, was seismic. I mean, it wasn't, you and I were talking on the phone. I got the notification. It wasn't 15 minutes later. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. I've probably taken 6, 8, 9 phone calls today, probably 15 text messages. I mean, this is one of the biggest political things I've seen in quite some time. And really, it's to be expected. You know, President Trump threw out I don't know, probably 3 or 4 months ago and said, hey, if you guys get the Save America Act, if John Cornyn gets his stuff together, Ken Paxton will step down and I'll ride with you. And they just didn't do it. And the funniest thing about all of this story is every one of the Republicans you would think who are mad. And they're all saying, well, we're not going to do anything anymore. And I thought to myself, you haven't done anything anyway, so business as usual. So it's a really interesting situation. And with Bill Cassidy in Louisiana Saturday and what's going on tonight in the 6 states of the primary, I think we're going to see a lot of fireworks over the next 6 months.
You know, I tend to agree with you, and especially what you just said. The swamp, if you will, those long-timers up in D.C. that were never fans of Trump and what he does, and now that, Bill Cassidy has lost his Senate seat, and then, of course, you've got, it looks like another one, I can see them melting down and freaking out. But the point is, they're saying, I've been hearing the same rumbles that you're getting, saying that, that's it, they're not going to work any longer with Trump. These people, we're talking about the Mitch McConnells, the Lisa Murkowskis, the Tom Tillises of the world that aren't even remotely interested in working with Trump. They're always forcefully being dragged along in order to do it. How can they do anything less than what they're already doing?
They can't. I mean, that's really the story today, is it highlights what they were not doing. And we've seen it because you and I live in this world and we follow everything. And we're watching as, I always find it interesting because people will say, well, if you're not a Trump sycophant, you're going to be drummed out of the party. No, I mean, Trump just wants people who are going to work with him. The country went to the polls in November and said, we like what Donald Trump brings. We want to put him back in office after 4 years of Sleepy Joe and all of the things we got there. We want to bring him back. We want to bring America back. We want people who will do that. And we've watched now for what? I mean, it's been 18 months now, 16, 18 months now, and not a doggone thing's gotten done other than the big, beautiful bill. What are they actually doing for Americans or anything to make your life somewhat better?
Well, I like to say, wait, you got 4 years out of Sleepy Joe? I think I only got about 2.5 at best. But the country, unfortunately, had to endure the additional time. And it's very interesting. And then once again, you talk about Trump. He teased an endorsement a few months ago, and then now he came through with it. I'm almost smack dab in the middle of early voting, which means there was, I don't know what exactly happened that occurred to make Trump do this at this point now, but and it was a solid endorsement. So that basically, and I saw, of course, John Cornyn, or certain callers call him John Corwin, who he responded the only way he can here in a primary race that I believe this could be his death knell. And I also saw in the polls that roughly 90% of the voters that either support John Cornyn, if Ken Paxton does ultimately win this primary, they will support him in November as whoever goes up against James Talafrico, who is a crazy Democrat radical person that parades himself as they're parading him as a moderate. Do you think the Republicans will coalesce around whichever candidate it is, which is looking more and more likely to be, Ken Paxton against a Talafrico here in Texas?
Oh yes. In my mind here, as I see it, all of the people who voted for Wesley Hunt will probably jump on the Paxton bandwagon now, if they weren't before, right? I think that, Paxton was probably going to get 70 or 80% of Hunt's people, which was 180,000 votes, by the way. It wasn't no small measure. So Cornyn was going to get, 20% or so. And I think about probably 60 to 70% of Cornyn voters are going to jump on with Paxton. I just think there's about 30% of Cornyn voters that are really just liberal, moderate, mushy Republicans that ought to be Democrats anyway. You and I have had this conversation, Chris, and we've talked about this. John Cornyn was the devil we knew, right? For the most part, he'd vote big stuff for Republicans, but every now and again he'd get that wild hair on amnesty or guns or something, and he'd go jogging off with the swamp. And people just got tired of it. And so they started asking. I think Ken Paxton did a fantastic job of saying, what has John Cornyn done the last 42 years he's been in office? And I don't know if anybody can really list the thing that he's done.
Well, he didn't support the wall. He didn't support Trump. He said we were supposed to move past Trump, and clearly we did not. And now it looks like it may end up costing him his Senate seat. And like you said, what can you name other than being pretty swampy, which is what they're. Unfortunately, there's a few others that are still there, but we'll see what happens. And then we got a pretty heated Senate race that's going to be going on here in Texas. The Democrats understand Texas is the pie in the sky. If they can capture Texas, they will own elections in this country. So they're going to rally behind James Talafrico as hard as they possibly can and then try to get this guy elected. I believe they will spend at least $100 million after their we'll call them Beto tests. The Beto, O'Rourke test that they tried to do with him, and they couldn't get him across the board with almost $100 million, and then he ran for everything you could think of and lost all of his races. So now they've moved on to this squirrely-looking dude who's never had a girlfriend until now they're asking. So I'm telling you, there's something weird with him, but I believe that the Republicans will coalesce around the candidate, and most likely we won't end up with a James Talarico. That does not mean that we take him lightly and don't get out and vote. We're also in the middle of early voting, Matt. So my question to you is, we're under an early voting. Are you an early voter or are you an election day voter?
No, I'm an election day voter. I have never voted early. I never will. I think election day should be a holiday. I think everybody should go vote on that day and be done. But that's just me. I don't like to early vote. It's election day. It's what it is. Go vote on election day. But I want to add to what you were saying with Talarico. He's a very flawed candidate. It doesn't mean we take him for granted. You just said it. I mean, Democrats have a baked-in 42% here in Texas. I just don't think the electorate here in Texas, with the new, the Hispanics and all of the coalitions that we've gotten under Trump, some blacks, all that stuff, I just don't think it works in Talarico's advantage. I think you're going to see something like the Ted Cruz, O'Rourke, election where Ted ended up winning by 5-6 points. I think you're going to see that with Paxton. I actually think Paxton was more electable than Cornyn this go around against the Talarico.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We've seen the polls, and the polls got them basically 50-50, and supposedly they had, Cornyn a little bit ahead. But once again, you can't even do that because you still got the primary was going on. It's still going on. So there's that aspect of it. But, yeah, I think we will see shortly how things line up here once whoever the nominee will be. And it's looking more and more like it's going to be Ken Paxton over John Cornyn today. I'm assuming, since you're an election day voter, you'll be voting next Tuesday here in the primary. I wonder which way you're going to vote. You voting for John Cornyn or Ken Paxton?
I was a Paxton vote before the endorsement. So look, and I'm like you, and you and I have conversations all the time. Whoever would have won Cornyn or Paxton, I would have voted over Talarico every day of the week and twice on Sunday. So it really doesn't matter. But I was a Paxton voter. I like Ken. I like what he's done as the attorney general. I just quite frankly don't care about the personal stuff. I mean, you go back to Trump with the baggage and ex-wives and babies and playboys and all that stuff. I really honestly just don't care what you do in your personal life. What can you do as a politician to help me? You're just a tool. And I think that Paxton was a better tool. I think he's going to do more things that will help you and I more than a Cornyn. And we watched today, Chris. I mean, it's obvious as you watch John Thune parade out to the cameras with his bottom lip stuck out like he lost his best friend in crime. And it drives me crazy because these politicians think they're entitled to those seats. They're there so long, they believe that they're royalty, and how dare the peasants kick them out of it? Don't you know what's good for you? I'm John Cornyn. I've been here 42 years. How dare you? And that's the Thune, attitude today. How dare you make a decision that doesn't align with what they and their big-time handlers want?
Boy, that ain't no joke. By the way, I heard you had a guest on today. It's a guy probably no one's ever heard of, a guy that came down from Pennsylvania who actually had a big effect in the last election, and he came down and got involved in the Cornyn-Paxton race and was endorsing people vote for Ken Paxton. I'm referring to a guy by the name of Scott Presler. Probably, I don't know, most people have probably never heard of that guy, you think?
No, nobody's ever heard of that dude. I mean, it's good that Scott and I are good friends. I met him years ago. I will tell you, I don't know anybody in this movement that has done more work than Scott Presler. I mean, I just don't know anybody who has worked their tail off, who has been out everywhere. I mean, that guy has been in multiple states, out getting people signed up and registered to vote. He is so motivated for America. I mean, Trump, I'll guarantee he's got Trump's phone number, and he's just a good guy, right? He's a guy that believes in America. And by the way, Chris, I mean, most people may not know this, but he's gay, and nobody cares. I mean, he's a gay Republican who loves America. I mean, you think the left would love him, but he gets out there and he works hard. He's a very good man. And, I mean, he's done more for the Republican Party in the last 10 years than I think anybody other than Trump.
Holy Scott Presler. I'm sorry. It's funny because maybe Scott Bessent is probably more what I want to say. Another one. Once again, and I met Mr. Presler at CPAC, I think 2020 maybe. And once, like you said, he's a super nice guy, and he just happens to be gay, which is funny because you're right. He should be a warrior for the left, but because he goes out and he is conservative-minded and wants Republicans to get elected and has an impact, he'd been doing it on his own dime for years, and he wasn't even taking any money. Now, they finally got some money to get him out so he can go and continue his mission, but my God, like you said, I wish half the Republicans worked half as hard as he does to get Republicans elected. Boy, we'd have a much better electorate in this country, wouldn't we?
Yeah, he's just a smart guy, and he loves America. He connects with people. And he was running for some office in Pennsylvania. He's on the ballot. So it's like, you know what? I mean, he finally said, look, I'm going to do what I tell everybody to do. I'm going to get involved. I'm going to put my name in the ring and see what happens. So God bless him. I mean, it's nice to know people like this, but he's in Texas all this week working his tail off to get good, solid Republicans elected. And he saw something in Paxton as well. So it was not just me or you. It's a lot of people like Ken Paxton, and a lot of people like what he stands for. And I'm telling you, in this runoff, I mean, the prediction markets, the polls today, I don't believe anymore. The prediction markets had Ken Paxton 65-35 winning in this runoff. And I wouldn't be shocked if Paxton didn't win 55-45 easily at this point.
Yeah, I was going to say at this point now with the Trump endorsement, that very well could be the death knell for John Cornyn's political career. So, all right, Matt, tell everyone how they can follow you. And other than listening to you on 9 to 11 a.m. on WBAP 820 a.m. up in Dallas, Monday through Friday, how else can they follow you?
Well, you can follow me at Matlock Radio. Locke is my last name, at Matlock Radio. And if you want to hear my silky, sexy, sweet voice, Monday through Friday, 9 to 11 on News Talk 820 WBAP. You can go online at WBAP.com. The podcast is getting ready to launch here this week. So you can get all kinds of Matlock. Just go there.
There you go. All right. Thanks for your time today, Matt. Always good to catch up with you. Appreciate it.
Always, my friend.
All right, let's go ahead and take a break. We'll go ahead and open up the phones as well at 281-558-KSEV, 281-558-5738. Appreciate Matlock, the voice of DFW. I'm keeping that moniker for him. I think his ratings are speaking for itself. He is the host, once again, 9 to 11 a.m. on 820 a.m. WBAP. So he's out there spreading the word, doing what he can. And like I said, he had Scott Presler on today, and I remembered Scott. I talked to him at CPAC, super nice guy, and that guy was working on his own dime to get Republicans elected. And that's finally some people got together and raised some money for him, which is good because the guy was costing him his health, and the guy worked really hard. So God bless him. I'm glad he's in Texas, and man, if there's a fierce MAGA warrior, as Trump seems to like, that's a true MAGA warrior right there. This guy's working his tail off, and he was doing it for nothing. All right, 281-558 KSEV. You're listening to Chris X Radio. We'll come back, wrap up this first hour, get you locked and loaded for hour number 2. I want to thank Matt Locke for joining us from WBAP, 820 a.m., Monday through Fridays, 9 to 11 a.m. It was good. We were talking about James Talafrico. They had an interview with him about his girlfriend because, Democrats generally, even though they claim to be all for, but they won't vote for gay people. But check this little interview out with James Talafrico as they try to normalize him to the voting public of Texas.
The biggest question, not even close, the most popular question that we got asked is, are you single? Are you single? So you have a girlfriend.
I do.
Of many years.
I do. And she is my rock. She is my best friend.
My best friend? Anyway,
I don't know if I could have gotten through the last 6 months of this crazy race if she hadn't been by my side. So, thanks for asking about her as well.
Do you want kids one day?
Yes, he wants trans
What
kids.
can you share with us about that?
Well, now you sound like my mom asking when I'm going to give her another grandbaby. I definitely do. I definitely do want to have kids one day. Yeah. It's kind of hard in the middle of this campaign to think, the next week ahead. Certainly hard to think that far in advance, but it's definitely something that I want to do one day.
This reminds me of a bit that they did on SNL back in the 90s called The Effeminate Heterosexual. Oh, dear God, I do want kids. I would love kids. I love the trans kids that come to the state capitol. So I'd love a trans kid of my own. I'd love to have a trans kid so the trans kid could be a kid of mine. I would love trans kids. I'm not saying he's gay. I'm just saying they're giving him a makeover. He looks better. They got makeup on him. And now he's got a girlfriend. Now he's had a girlfriend for years. His best friend. I'm not saying he's gay. I'm just saying. All right, hour number 2 is up next.
You're listening to the Voice of Texas, AM 700 KSEV Tomball and AM 1540 KGBC Galveston.
News this hour from Town Hall. I'm Keith Peters in Washington. The busiest U.S. commuter rail system resumes operations as a deal is reached to end the strike.
The Long Island Railroad strike that made hundreds of thousands of commuters scramble for alternate transportation is over as trains once again roll on the tracks. LIRR President Rob Free says the MTA and the unions found a way to make the numbers work.
I can't go into details about the agreement, but there are things in there that make it more affordable, make it more palatable for the unions to agree upon, and make it easier for us to fit within our financial structure.
And
we wouldn't have accepted the deal if it would put a burden on the taxpayers and the ridership.
The first LIRR strike in decades lasted 3 days. Julie Walker, New York.
A major endorsement is shaking up Texas's Republican Senate race. Correspondent Willie Nelson reports.
President Trump is endorsing Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton in the state's Republican Senate runoff, backing him over longtime Senator John Cornyn. Trump calls Paxton an American first patriot and praises his loyalty to the MAGA movement. The endorsement comes as both candidates compete for the chance to face Democrat Senate candidate James Tallarico. Willie Nelson reporting.
More than 17,000 people are under evacuation orders as a wildfire continues to threaten suburban homes in Southern California. The Sandy Fire in hills above Simi Valley, northwest of Los Angeles, has consumed more than 2 square miles of dry brush as of Tuesday. There is zero containment. The cause is under investigation. Evacuation orders and warnings are still in place for several neighborhoods in Simi Valley, a city of more than 125,000 people. On Wall Street, the Dow down by 322 points, the S&P lower by 49. More at townhall.com.
Hey, if your loved one is aging but still mobile, still values their independence, there's a simple tool that keeps them safe and keeps you in the know. I am proud to tell you about Safety Plus by Connected Caregiver. Safety Plus is a wearable device that alerts you immediately if your loved one has had a fall. They can wear it as a necklace, on their belt, or there's even a great watch option. There's even a simple push button on the device allowing mom or dad instant access to emergency services. As you age, it's not like you plan for a fall. Suddenly your knee might lock up, there's an uneven surface, wet floor. There's simply no excuse to not wear something discreet that keeps you safe and can keep you at home longer. That's Safety Plus by Connected Caregiver. To see if you qualify for a free device, call 888-870-8020, 888-870-8020, or visit ccgoffer.com, ccgoffer.com. Again, 888-870-8020. With Connected Caregiver, peace of mind is just a phone call away.
Here's the Wall Street Business Report.
The stock market gave back more of its record-setting rally. The S&P 500 fell 0.7 for the third straight loss since setting its latest all-time high. The Dow dropped 0.6%, and the Nasdaq Composite sank 0.8%. The declines followed mixed moves for stock markets abroad, while oil prices eased their latest yo-yo move. Tech stocks are faltering following huge runs as higher yields in bond markets cranked up the pressure on all kinds of other investments. The Dow losing 322 points today to close at 49,363. The Nasdaq dropped 220 to 25,870. The S&P 500 fell 49 points to 73.53. This is the Wall Street Business Report. I'm John Scott.
News and analysis at townhall.com.
Shopping insurance? Contact Joe Wardell. He's an independent agent, and he can look at what you have, shop and see. His number, 281-944-9025. Joe Wardell, 281-944-9025.
This True Sand commentary is brought to you by Ability Tree Experts. Ability Tree Experts, Houston's leading tree care professionals. Call 281-441-4179.
From KSEV, here's political contributor Ben Strusand.
Military planners always assumed that if a war with Iran began, the Iranians would attempt to take the Persian Gulf hostage and close the Straits of Hormuz. What nobody expected was that the Iranians would be allowed to export while America's allies, the Saudis, Kuwaitis, the UAE, and occasionally Qatar, would be blocked. A sort of mutually assured destruction was expected to provide enough leverage on Iran to keep the straits open. Yet, for a brief period, they were allowed to export their own crude and charge a ransom to anyone else wanting to do the same. That is, until the U.S. Navy stepped in with a blockade of its own on all Iranian exports, including crude oil. In just a few weeks, Iranian storage will max out, leaving Iranian oil producers with no other choices but to shut in oil wells permanently, damaging their ability to fund their economy, pay their military, and bankroll their terrorist proxies. The cutoff would be close to 100%, a huge blow if continued. Which is why, even though Democrats in Congress attempted to hand the Iranians a victory by pulling funding from our military, the United States will successfully force the Iranians to yield and concede to open the straits and end their nuclear weapons program, one way or another. Despite the media fawning over the brilliance of Iranian strategy, the Iranians will lose. Despite his political opponents rooting for U.S. strategy to fail, President Trump has bent the arc of history and dealt a homicidal regime a blow it will take decades to recover. The American people have not supported this war, and high gas prices will harm Republican chances in November. But the prospects of a deal on America's terms should result in us doing a lot better than most people think. I'm Ben Strusand, and that's my view.
Ben Strusand. Only on AM 700 KSEV.
Launch control, this is Houston. We are go for launch.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It's ChrisX Radio.
What we need right now is a clear message to the people of this country. This message must be read in every newspaper, heard on every radio, seen on every television. This message must resound throughout the entire interlink.
And now your host.
I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
ChrisX.
To the second hour of ChrisX Radio here on your Taco Tuesday edition of the program. Glad to have you here with us as we are rocking and rolling here once again. Getting to taco hour. All right, rolling up to 6 p.m. Well, I mean, that'd be taco hour for me. Won't be taco hour for the Craig Collins Show, which takes over at 6 p.m. every weeknight here on the Voice of Texas. A lot of good programming here for you. So we're rolling here with ChrisX Radio. I'm the aforementioned X-Man. Glad to have you here with us. Want to remind everyone early voting is underway. It's rolling through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and then the runoff election day is next Tuesday, May 26th. So whether you're an early voter or an election day voter, you got your choice. You take your pick. It hasn't been quite as wet today as I thought. Now, that maybe it's just my area. I don't know if the rest of the city has gotten a bunch of rain today, but it doesn't seem like they've gotten a bunch. Some places have gotten some scattered showers, I guess. But nonetheless, early voting is underway. A lot going on. I've got some good Chris X Files I'm going to try to get to in this segment. And then we'll be taking your calls here in hour number 2. If you want to join us here on your Taco Tuesday edition of the program, 281-558 KSEV, 281-558-5738. All right, so President Trump came out and endorsed Ken Paxton today over the incumbent John Cornyn, which doesn't bode well for Mr. John Cornyn. He endorsed Paxton. He called him a MAGA champion. And this kind of endorsement is huge, especially on the second day of early voting and then leading up through Election Day. We got a few days to let it sink in. Trump was like, Ken is a true MAGA warrior who's always delivered for Texas. He will continue to do so in the U.S. Senate. Trump had been teasing this endorsement for a while, and then, of course, he announced it today in front of the ballroom that he's working on. Him forcing reporters, still got my Trump vernacular going on. Him forcing reporters to cover him while they're doing construction on the ballroom is hilarious. But he makes them do it. And, of course, then he talked about, he endorsed John Cornyn. He endorsed Ken Paxton over John Cornyn. A lot of people kept thinking he was going to endorse John Cornyn. I guess just because of the traditional. If anything, people should understand Trump is not a traditional type president, traditional type anything. He has completely upset the apple cart, and we just saw this in Louisiana with Bill Cassidy. He is now officially donezo. He'll be out in November because he lost his own primary to a Trump-endorsed candidate. Now here we have Trump endorsing Ken Paxton, who's running against John Cornyn, the longtime senator from the state of Texas. A lot of these guys that have been there a really long time have a tough time seeing the writing on the wall. Times are changing because the old guard has let us down so many times. So many times we've seen this. So what's happened is, Trump comes in and is like, all right, we'll get somebody that actually has fought for Texas, somebody that fights. And boy, there's no doubt Ken Paxton has been the most successful attorney general in the country, fighting against Democrats and their sharp tyrannical rule they put everywhere they're in charge. And so Trump mentioned that now whoever wins, if Ken Paxton ultimately does, he'll go on to face James Tallarico, who on an interview, they're asking him now about his girlfriend. They've determined, okay, we got to talk about this because the guy just does not. Well, I'll let his response speak for itself.
This question, not even close. The most popular question that we got asked is, are you single? Are you single? So you have a girlfriend.
I do.
Of many years.
I do. And she is my rock. She is my best friend. I don't know if I could have gotten through the last 6 months of this crazy race if she hadn't been by my side. So
they got a little too much bass in their microphones, by the way, but I'll postulate on that here.
Yeah, thanks for asking about her as well.
Do you want?
What's her name? Did anyone say her name? What's her name again?
It's one day. What can you share with us about that?
Well, now you sound like my mom asking when I'm going to give her another grandbaby.
Yes, of course I want trans kids. I would love to have a trans kid or two. I would love that.
I definitely do. I definitely do want to have kids one day. Yeah. It's kind of hard in the middle of this campaign to think, the next week ahead. Certainly hard to think that far in advance, but it's definitely something that I want to do one day.
It's definitely something I want to do. I'd love to have trans kids here in the future. The dude actually said he loves trans children. That's when they asked him, what do you love besides your family? He didn't mention his girlfriend then. He mentioned trans kids at the Capitol. And once again, this reminds me of an SNL skit called The Effeminate Heterosexual. He's never been married, which I've never been married. Has 0 public girlfriends. I've had more than a few public girlfriends. Team noted he had an active social life, his team, and dated the homecoming queen. Well, that should be easily verifiable because he was the theater kid superstar in high school. Well, okay, there's another strike against him. How many straight theater superstars that aren't female can you think of? So it also explains why he's so good when he's crafted and he's speaking and he can actually turn off that little bit of a lilt, I guess, that unfortunately a lot of gay men have. I did notice they didn't mention his girlfriend's name. In fact, we've never heard her name. Texas has only elected a gay Congress member once in history, and they've never elected an openly gay senator. This may explain why Obama was down campaigning for him. Not that Obama's gay or anything. I mean, he was in college, but since then he's totally heterosexual. I didn't want to go into that too much, but once again, there you go. Okay, so tonight we may know the fate of one Thomas Massey, who has been one of those guys that's just too damn Republican to vote Republican. He's so damn Republican, he can't support Republicans anymore. And of course, he's definitely an anti-Trumper, hates Donald Trump. And then now the Trump-endorsed candidate, Ed Gallring, is running. Pete Hegseth was campaigning for him yesterday, and we'll see how that plays out tonight. So could he go the way of Bill Cassidy, or will he be able to survive this primary to go on to November? We shall see. Iran has sent an updated peace proposal via the Pakistani mediators. So we'll see. Trump had called off supposedly an anticipated strike today because of the serious negotiations. We shall see how that plays out. And then once again, Trump had called out reporters and made them cover him right in front of the construction of the ballroom going on over at the White House, which I thought was pretty good. Okay, so last night, this is from the, let's just go ahead and do some Chris X-Files. Let me go ahead and get this going. The Chris X-Files seem to get more bizarre every minute.
Imagine a place in the darkest corners of your mind. There's a man sitting there with a microphone. His name is Chris X. Now grab your tinfoil hats and take a journey with him into the Chris X Files.
So this is kind of interesting as we've got the Chris X Files, because you've got Jesse Waters last night did a segment, and it was a very interesting segment regarding alien UFOs that have crashed, but also the 4 different types of alien species that were found on board. This is Fox News covering this. It's pretty interesting. So I had to grab the audio and play it for you. Take a listen. This is utterly fascinating that this has now somehow made its way into the mainstream.
We are not alone. The Pentagon released the UFO files a few weeks back, and we just found out over 1 billion people have visited the site. 1 billion.
Wow.
It's got to be a record.
Yeah.
The War Department says more files will be released soon. UFO experts and top researchers have been investigating aliens for years. Their sources say dozens of crashed UFOs have been recovered, and what they found inside, shocking.
By the way, very quickly, Joe called in and mentioned like this was some kind of distraction from this has been going on for many, many years, much longer than Hunter Biden's laptop. And no, like I said, Hunter Biden's laptop so far in the past. So once again, it makes no sense to say Hunter Biden's laptop has to do with the disclosure of flying crafts, non-human intelligence that we don't know who they are or what they are, that is now being released by the White House. So that's kind of just, I mean, you got to go really outboard because we're so far past the Hunter Biden files because he's already moved out of the country and owes a bunch of legal fees. And so do I think it's a distraction? It absolutely is not. What is it distracting from? You're going to have to come up with something better than Hunter Biden's laptop. But this is something that has been investigated and questioned not only for years, but decades. And now we're learning more very strange things. And this Fox News story goes on to say some really weird stuff.
And do people think that there's one type of non-human intelligence that's visiting the Earth, or is there many, many types?
People who have been involved in recoveries have said
there are at least 4 separate types.
Okay.
Now, I have not had direct access to that, but I believe the people who I talked to.
4 different types of life.
4 different types of life.
4 different species of aliens. Another scientist called them Greys, Nordics, Insectoids, and reptilians.
What?
All of them have 2 arms and 2 legs, just like us. Experts speculate the reptilians are scaly with long tails like a lizard. Insectoids look like a praying mantis. The Greys look like your classic movie alien, and the Nordics look like a regular Swedish guy, but 7 feet tall. We haven't seen the evidence, but Pete Hegseth says more evidence is coming, and there are a lot of believers in Congress.
I have seen evidence in a skiff that leads me to believe there are things we cannot explain, and I have observed things that are of non-human origin and creation. That's my opinion.
Releasing the files isn't easy. They've been hidden for years, and a lot of people want to keep it that way.
The problem we have right now is the deep state's fighting the president on release, and he kept his word, and I suspect
Jim Burchett, he's so
not
southern.
so friendly comrades and some of our alphabet agencies are slow walking a lot of the information. It's about power, it's about control, and that's kind of what runs Washington.
So why is our own government fighting so hard to keep these secret? Well, a dozen scientists have either gone missing or died. Now, we don't know if that's related, but people are scared to talk.
One I thought was going to do an interview, and then a couple days before sent me a message saying, after further consideration and long talks with my wife, I decided I'd be forfeiting my life if I participated in your interview. And I thought that was like very unsettling message to get, obviously, but also very specific word choice, you know, forfeiting my life.
Well, with the scientists that have disappeared here as of late in the last few years, but also here in the last few months, that seems to be a legit claim. The 4 different types of life. Okay. Insectoids that look like a giant praying mantis. Okay, and then the Nordics, which are the 7-foot tall Swedes, I guess. I can only picture Trump talking about this. Listen, the Nordics, so they're so tall, they're so fantastic, they're so huge. They basically look like alien versions of Melania. They're 7 foot tall, have long blonde hair. They're fantastic, they're huge. You'll never believe them if I didn't tell you. And then, of course, the reptilians, which goes back to V. If you guys ever watched that series, there have been multiple iterations of the series V, which were reptilians that look like humans. And then the movie They Live, which was really interesting. They didn't look like reptilians. They looked like weird robots. So that was weird. The funny thing is, I want to say this is crazy land. This is bizarro world. This is insane. This is ridiculous. But we now know there are objects flying around in restricted airspaces as well as unrestricted airspaces that have technology that is so vastly superior to anything that we have, we can't even comprehend it. We don't know if it's from here or somewhere else. We don't know if it's interdimensional or if it's from another galaxy or solar system somewhere. The thought to believe that we're the only life in the universe that has evolved to this point seems to be a pretty egocentric driven thought. It also seems to be kind of foolish. And then to say, well, how come we don't get to see them and talk to them? Well, let me ask you this. If you went to another planet and found a life form that wasn't quite as evolved as you, and you had the ability to travel faster and make them not really know you're there, especially if they were a violent group that is killing each other on the streets of their cities and launching bombs that would wipe out hundreds of thousands, if not millions, in the blink of an eye, and they were just very violent creatures, would you go and talk to them? When you look at it from that perspective, it's kind of like Empire of the Apes, that documentary that Joe Rogan talked about. If I had the ability to travel to another planet and see a species that was doing this, killing themselves and each other and fighting over territory and doing all this stuff, and I'm like, I damn sure wouldn't admit it, because we've already seen there have been people that claim they've shot at UFOs, and we actually, somebody shot a Hellfire missile from a drone that bounced off one of these objects. And it looked like it broke up 3 or 4 different pieces that actually just trailed behind the object and then went back and joined with it. So there's like I said, had you told me that existed and was real and I could actually watch it on video, because you can, I would say you're crazy. This is sci-fi-ville. This isn't real. But I think we've learned that these things are real. And what's weird is, because of disinformation, which is something that has been taking place for possibly years, decades, maybe even 100 years at this point, that you can stigmatize something so much that nobody wants to talk about, that people will instantly discount because of their religion or because of preconceived notions, or I don't want to look like a complete whack job, and do that. That's very effective. It's almost as effective as trying to convince you someone like James Talafrico is a viable candidate here in Texas, and they'll convince enough people to vote for him, they'll make it a race out of it. But I think we're learning very quickly that we're not the top of the food chain that we once thought we were. There may be someone or something that is above us. This should be the most groundbreaking, earth-shattering story in the history of mankind. I use the term mankind for a reason, because this is something that is beyond mankind that we didn't know existed, or someone found out existed and has covered it up, whether it's on our own or maybe they've made an agreement with certain entities. We don't know. But it should be the most earth-shattering disclosure in the history. But we live in such a time of universal deceit with AI and people with political and whatever reasoning for making up things and lying that nobody believes anything anymore. I was watching the UAP community. They're all upset because Trump didn't release enough stuff. And then you got the other side's upset saying, oh, this is all a distraction. These are demons. Well, I don't know what it is. I'm not in charge and I have no inside information. But I do know that these things, there are things out there that somebody else, something else is in control of them. And they are so vastly superior to anything that we have that it's not even close. It's bizarre. And we're having to come to this realization, whether reluctantly or not. Some people probably never believe it until maybe, I don't know, maybe they decide to wipe out our civilization. Let's pray to God they don't. I don't want to see Independence Day and have to fight aliens that are so vastly superior that our Hellfire missiles bounce off them and don't do anything to them. That would kind of suck. I like sci-fi movies. I love watching these alien movies and stuff. It would be a very, very bad thing. Unless it happens to be like War of the Worlds, and then if they get out of their spaceships, they just die. And then, okay, oh, thank God for bacteria. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll actually get into a little bit more of the Trump endorsement today. What do you guys think? You want to weigh in on Trump's endorsement of Ken Paxton over John Cornyn? And also, did anybody go out and early vote today? Well, I've early voted yesterday, was in and out basically in a minute. It only took me a minute. It took 5 minutes for the lady to check me in. She wasn't quite really adept at what she was doing, so it took her 5 times longer than it did for me to actually vote. I was in and out. Did anybody go vote today? Still low lines? I wonder if the Paxton endorsement is going to increase turnout here in the runoff. 281-558-KSEV, 281-558-5738. I'm Chris X. We'll be right back. Don't you go anywhere. I enjoy me some good Duran Duran from the 80s. Now, you guys on the video stream, you can't hear that. But you guys listening on KSEV 700 AM or 1540 or downloading the app, KSEV Radio, or, of course, KSEVradio.com, you can all hear that. But you guys on the stream, you can't because our cyber overlords get upset. Once again, don't act. It doesn't make sense. It just, that's how it is. Anyway, welcome back to ChrisX Radio here on your Taco Tuesday edition of the program. Once again, early voting is underway through Friday, May 22nd. That's this coming Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Has anyone gone out and voted today? We heard from some people yesterday. In fact, I heard from probably as many people as we heard from on the show after the show that were listening. That were all saying, hey, yeah, I went and voted and I was in and out in a minute. I mean, there are no lines. So if you want to get in and out and vote and get it done quick, now's probably the time to do it. In early voting, you have till Friday, or you can vote on Election Day. Some people are Election Day voters. You heard Matt Locke in the first hour; he's an Election Day voter. I don't understand why. Like I said, I guess some people like the tradition of it, maybe, but I'm busy. I got stuff going on. I want to get in and out as quickly as possible. And there's been times where I've actually early voted and waited in line for an hour. So any chance I can get in and out and don't have to wait, I'm good with that. If they're going to try to cheat, they're going to try to cheat on Election Day or early voting, whatever. So anyway, all right, welcome back to ChrisX Radio. Let's go ahead and go to the phones if you want to join us. President Trump has endorsed Ken Paxton over John Cornyn today. I do believe that will most likely be the death knell, if you will, for Cornyn's political career, at least in the Senate for sure. Who knows? But we'll see what happens. It may give, Paxton sort of had a bit of a lead, but that may give him a boost that we shall see. And then, of course, that would clean things up here in the primary, which we'll know next Tuesday. By the way, Thomas Massie has his primary today. He's fighting off a Trump-endorsed candidate, Ed Galrin, who is former military. And this guy is, had Pete Hegseth campaigning for him yesterday. But their primary is tonight, so we'll know tomorrow whether Massie survives his primary, where Bill Cassidy in Louisiana lost his over the weekend. So he's out. So a lot going on. There's a lot of stuff happening. Let's go to the phones, 281-558-KSEV. Let's go to Peter, who's been patiently holding here in Houston. Peter, thanks for hanging on. Welcome to ChrisX Radio.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, I voted and put on the Democratic side, of course, for Anise Parker, who, maybe she has a good chance, maybe she doesn't. But I called on for county judge, but I was calling about the UAP, topic, which is outstanding. It's very engaging. And hey, Chris, did you know that 36% of Americans believe in psychic ability, like our ability to communicate telepathically? About 4 out of every 10 Americans believe that actually, telepathy and that psychic ability, it's real. Much like how these aliens, they don't have mouths, and and that's how they communicate, through telepathy. So, what are your thoughts on that? That 36% of us believe in that.
I've heard that poll before. I've heard that poll before, and there's a lot of things that are unexplained. And like I said, I know people are always looking for explanations for especially the unexplained. But yeah, I've heard not only the poll that roughly 36% of people believe in telepathy, but also, you're right, we often hear reports about these people who have been in contact with the aliens and claim that they are communicated with via telepathy, which, the funny thing is, people say, well, that's not possible. Well, 15, 20 years ago, Bluetooth wasn't impossible. To take your phone and you don't have to connect it to a wire and it goes to your radio and then you can communicate with people by that way leads me to believe that eventually, at some point in time, whether we already have or not, that we would eventually be able to communicate telepathically. And so that's very interesting. I didn't, it's funny, in my personal experience, I wouldn't have believed that 36% of people would have believed it, but that's according to the polls. So, yeah, I think it's very interesting, and it's, at this point, I think just about anything is possible when we start looking at this technology that we're dealing with, the UAP issue and this stuff. It's a real game changer.
Yeah, and supposedly the people who have the most connection, like where these things appear, like the Cash Lundrum incident here in 1980 on the Huffman Road, going up there to Cleveland. So people who have actually psychic abilities, supposedly they're the ones who are most likely to encounter these beings or ships or the alien, space aliens themselves.
the one you're talking about up in Huffman is a really interesting case because it was this weird object that was surrounded by helicopters, and it was shooting out fire out of the bottom of it, and at least 2 of the 3 people, maybe more, have died from cancer, have died from looks like nuclear poisoning, and that was in the Huffman area, literally right over there, very close to here where we are. Which one? And we don't know. Was this an experimental government craft they're working on? Most of them, the ones we hear, don't have fire shooting out of them. Most of them have no plume whatsoever. But that was a very fascinating case back from, like you said, the 80s. I think it was 1980. And then the people that saw it, that were witnessed it, that everybody claimed are crack jobs and they're not real. These people all got nuclear poisoning, basically radiation poisoning from whatever this object was, most likely, and it cost them their lives eventually down the road. So that's
her hair. Her hair was falling out. Mm-hmm. Betty Cash and
it was terrible.
Vicky Landrum and her. So yeah, it's very real, guys. When we this broadcast obviously reaches that area, so it's not fantasy, it's not fiction. These are real things. So and when we look at some of our technology, like driverless cars and solar and wind power, all these things. We talked about a couple of days ago. The rare earths that we need to really be. They're recycling a lot of this in Mountain Pass, California. So we really need to be focused on recycling what we have. Us producing more of these rare earth materials, because that's the wave of the future. Like our smart technology, technologies that are going to be the next best thing. I know Republicans are a bit critical of like the future technologies like your solar and wind, but that it really is where it's going. Like batteries, magnets. Like when we're not fully understanding the technology, so it has to be something. If it's nuclear or it's batteries, it's something that's generating electricity. That's really where we need to be, like future focused and forward leaning, not regressive. So.
Well, I'll say thanks for the call, Peter. I appreciate it. It's interesting, and I appreciate the call. Once again, you talk about the technology. You're right. You're looking at cellular technology with our cell phones and, like I said, Bluetooth, and then the internet, and then Wi-Fi. And look how technology has jumped here in the last 20, 30 years. And then look what it could be, and then start going that. And you talk about forward thinking. Well, there are people that are forward thinking. They were looking at nuclear before, and then those on the left hated nuclear power, so they didn't want that and tried to shut it down everywhere. And then now they want green, which isn't nearly as effective, but it's good. But what we've seen from people that claim to be insiders that have information that we don't have access to, these whatever these objects are, possibly harnessing elements of the universe that we're very unfamiliar with and are relatively new to us, or like I said, nuclear energy. And that's where we see these, some of these people that have faced the repercussions of getting too close to some of these objects or whatever they are. So there's that. Once again, I look at technology and how far we've come, and that the fact that people still vote for Democrats is amazing to me, Peter. It really blows my mind in this day and age, but they still do. And I'm glad you got out and voted, and thanks for the update on that. If anyone else has early voted so far, feel free to give us a call. 281-558-KSEV. Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll pick up with Cindy listening in Belleville. Man, I like Belleville. Belleville's a nice little town. The case, by the way, the case you're talking about in Huffman is very interesting. And then you go back and look at some of the drawings of what happened, because this was 1980, before everybody had cell phones and cameras, and the fact that these people that literally they thought they were sunburned from the object, but they weren't. They were radiation burned, and it eventually, like I said, killed at least a couple of them, which is terrible. But yeah, I've got a couple of family members live out in Huffman, so it's right down the street, right across 1960, across Lake Houston. So it's right over there. All right, 281-558-5738. I'm Chris X. We'll be right back. Welcome back to ChrisXradio. You've reached the penultimate segment. I hope the hall monitor's not listening. Just have to describe what the penultimate segment is. I remember years ago with the Lance Roberts show years ago, and then it was the Technical Tuesday with Jim Blake, super nice guy, but he would always say that, the penultimate segment. And I was like, why are you talking about the penultimate segment? It's not the ultimate at the end. And then now here I'm doing it. So if you're listening, Jim Blake, you live on in perpetuity forever. Anyway, this is the second to the last segment of the program, and then we'll turn things at 6 p.m. over to the Craig Collins Show, so make sure you stick around for that as well. You're listening to ChrisXradio. If you want to weigh in, did you get out and vote today? How are things? I imagine it's probably just as light as it was yesterday. Yesterday was very light. And then Trump endorsed Ken Paxton today over John Cornyn. That's going to have an impact in this election, I do believe. We'll see to what degree, I guess. Anyway, if you want to join us, 281-558-KSEV, 281-558-5738. Let's go to Cindy, listening in Belleville. Cindy, thanks for hanging on. Welcome to ChrisXradio.
Hi there, Chris. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you today, Cindy?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I was calling about UFO stories.
Okay, go right ahead.
So now that they're releasing the details of UFOs, I thought I'd give my story because everyone would thinks I'm crazy. But one night I was dog sitting for my son and daughter-in-law, and the two dogs and I were in bed asleep, and one of the dogs started barking profusely. Got out of bed, went to the window, I opened the curtain, and there in the driveway I saw this huge 7 or 8 foot figure. It was glowing, had big round oval green eyes that were glowing. It was simple in its form, long arms, long legs, bulbous fingers, and it was just standing in the road, and it scared me so bad I jumped back in bed. The dog ran under the bed and hid under the bed and didn't come out the whole day the next day.
Wow.
So
it's funny, of all
my
the times
son
I've
and
talked about
daughter-in-law
this
asked
stuff,
me if I'd been drinking. I said no.
shouldn't have ate those gummies before you went to bed. So
Oh yeah, probably the gummies. There you go.
Yeah, no, that's very, it's funny, of all the times that I've discussed, the Chris X Files and this UAP stuff, I haven't heard a lot of stories about people that have had experiences, because you're right, in the past you immediately get discounted as a weirdo, and now that's not necessarily the case, because we're learning, and of course video cameras are catching things that people didn't believe in or see in the past. So it's did you ever see anything else after that or anything, or was it just that?
Well, there was one other incident. This was my front yard. I happened to look out after, I don't know why, I looked out the window, and there was this round circle where the grass had all been burnt, and it had like two, where you'd see like the jets maybe at the end of something where it might be blowing out the jets or whatever. You could see those. Anyway, the grass was dead. It was a round circle, and the grass did not grow back for about 2 years. And then when it came back, it was a different type of grass. So.
Wow, man! Thanks for the call, Cindy. That's fascinating stuff. And once again, in the past, people would discount it immediately. Now, maybe not so much. And I'm wondering why John Fetterman was standing out in the road outside of. I'm just kidding. Just wanted to rip on Fetterman. Everybody thinks he's a Republican now, and he's not. Just wanted to rip on John Fetterman for some reason. Poor guy. He seems like a really nice guy, actually. Far nicer than I had any idea. All right, let's go ahead and take a break, and then we'll come back and wrap up things. You're listening to Chris X Radio. If you want to get lined up for the final segment, 281-558-KSEV. We got Mike out in Tomball. Mike, hold on. You'll be up next. And we'll get to wrap up the second day of early voting. It goes until 7 p.m. So, and then we're going through Friday, and then the runoff election for the primary is on Tuesday, next Tuesday. It's still, it's funny. You had Peter call in earlier. And Peter's, he's clearly a Democrat, and the guy's been listening to my shows for well over a decade. And it's funny, I wonder why he listens to conservative talk radio. And he tends to agree with me on the UAP stuff, which makes me want to rethink I'm just kidding. All right, 281-558-KSV. We'll come back and wrap up today's show. Don't you go anywhere. We'll be right back. Well, King's X for you. Not you guys on the internet. You guys don't count. Welcome back to ChrisX Radio. You've reached the final segment of the program. All right, we're going to jump to the phones here on your second day of early voting. Once again, we'll wrap up early voting here at 7 p.m. You stick around. We're done here at 6, but Craig Collins takes over at 6 p.m., so make sure you stick around and listen to his program. I listen to it most of the time because I'm going out to eat dinner, and I listen on the radio. You can hear everything on the radio at 700 a.m. or 1540 a.m. You can do that. So, but anyway, I want to try to get a couple of calls in before we run out of time. Let's go right back to the phones, pick up with Mike, who's been patiently holding in Tomball. Mike, thank you for hanging on. Welcome to ChrisX Radio.
Hey, Chris, I voted yesterday in the runoff. It was a very light turnout. I encourage every Republican, no matter who you vote for, to go out and vote. Let's make a statement by getting the max number of votes out that we can. It would really show something good, no matter who you vote for. I know people may disagree with that, but there's really not that much difference between either of the candidates philosophically. You know, for the Senate or the Attorney General, they've cherry-picked their points, and they're all pushing their side. So, you know, I'm comfortable with whoever gets the nomination will get my vote, either for Attorney General or for Senate. I've been a Republican for 40 years, and I'll always be a Republican.
And thank you for the call, Mike. I'm right there with you. I mean, like I said, your point, like, I'm with you, too. I mean, listen, I may have my preferred candidates here in the primary, and this is where you get out and make that voice heard, and you're absolutely right. I saw yesterday evening the turnout numbers, which were very light, but that Republicans had, on the first day of early voting, was like 2,000 more than the Democrat turnout. So, which doesn't really mean anything. This is a primary, so we're all voting for our own candidates. But it was just interesting that Republicans seemed to outvote Democrats yesterday. I don't know if that trend will hold through, but I agree with Mike's sentiment. And, hey, man, this is a good chance. And as we were talking with Senator Bencourt yesterday on the program, your vote means so much more when less people turn out and vote. And it's so funny how many people don't realize that and then want to complain about voting and how their vote doesn't mean anything, and then complain about the candidates when they didn't participate in the primary. It's utterly ridiculous. But once again, it shows the lack of knowledge a lot of people have regarding our political system, and then they've come to conclusions that are not factually based. But I appreciate the call. Thank you for the call, Mike. Let's go to Don, listening in Point Blank. Don, thanks for hanging on. Welcome to ChrisX Radio.
Yeah, just a couple of things. I'm still skeptical about these creatures from outer space. For one thing, you said maybe they don't want to communicate with us because we're so violent. Well, the SETI thing, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, is all the years it's been scanning outer space, it's picked up nothing intelligent. I mean, no signals intelligent. Whoever would have sent out these signals, they wouldn't know whether we're violent or not. Plus, being so far away, light years over 6 trillion miles, and the nearest star.
The other thing, well, hold on. First of all, yes, you're right with SETI. Then again, who are we getting the information from? The government's going to control that, so we don't know what we've actually heard or not. We're also talking about supposedly these objects that are here, that are already here, that may have been here the entire time. Maybe they're not from outer space. Maybe they've been here a whole lot longer than we have, so there's that aspect of it. So if they're monitoring us from inside, well, then there's that. And it was funny you mentioned the detection of intelligent life. Sometimes some people would argue with you it's hard to detect intelligent life forms on this planet. So, and I kind of agree with that sentiment to a certain extent. But anything that was here that is monitoring us would realize we are a very dangerous species. Now, we're used to it because it's our species, but you look at the murder rate in every city, you look at what happens on wars and all that. We are an extremely violent species. There are some peaceful versions of us, but man, like I said, we're talking about species that actually nuked an entire different culture because they wouldn't give up and wanted to continue killing people. So there's like I said, so I understand your perspective.
Yeah, another astrophysicist, a Japanese fellow, I see him a lot, I don't know his name, but he said these objects, whatever the creatures are, reptiles, insects, or big fleas, or, they couldn't withstand the G-force, so these things may be monitoring us, but they couldn't have creatures inside them and make 90-degree instant turns.
Hold on, that is. Thank you for the call, Don. We're out of time. Your perspective from our human perspective is correct. From theirs, if they create their own gravitational pull and have their own gravitational field, all bets are off. That doesn't matter anymore. So once again, if you're looking at these propulsion systems that we don't understand, and someone who has learned how to manipulate gravity, we're also looking at linear space travel. They don't travel that way. It's a very different conversation. All right, gang, the Craig Collins Show's up next. We'll see you tomorrow.
You're listening to the Voice of Texas, AM 700 KSEV Tomball, and AM 1540 KGBC Galveston.
News this hour from Town Hall. I'm Keith Peters in Washington. The suspects in a California mosque attack may have had a